Okay, so we're going to get started. My name is Ann Reeder, and I want to welcome you to the Quality Matters in 4-H webinar. This should be about an hour, give or take, depending on how much, how many questions you guys have, and I guess how long I could talk for. So I'm a coordinator here in the 4-H state office. I mainly work with the quality initiatives on the after-school side and Quality Matters in 4-H. And I'm also overseeing the volunteer screening process right now. So before we get started, I would like to begin by just kind of doing a quick overview of the tools that you'll need during our time together. So your cameras are optional, and I see most of us have chosen not to do the camera, which is fine. I haven't figured out how not to do the camera yet, so otherwise I probably have it off too. But your cameras are optional. Make sure you have a microphone or a phone and have it muted unless you're talking. And then we will be using the chat box today as much as we can. Again, this is my first time doing Zoom, so I don't really know how the chat box works. If you all can see it, hopefully you all can see it. But I would like to do a little bit of engagement, not too much, but through the chat box. And then also feel free to ask questions throughout this webinar, and I have saved time at the end for you to ask questions. But again, I see there's a raise hand feature. I will try to answer questions along the way. You can interrupt me. So our agenda today is we're going to do a little opening activity. Hopefully you'll participate in it through the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. We're going to talk about the pyramid, the program quality framework. Just go a little bit about the research behind the framework of the program quality pyramid. We're going to dive deep into the assess, plan, improve model, talk briefly about the expectation next steps, and then do a little reflection activity at the end. So the overall goal for today's webinar is to provide 4-H faculty and staff with a crash course on Missouri Quality Matters in 4-H process. By the end of this webinar, I hope you have a general understanding of the Youth Program Quality Framework, have a working understanding of the Youth Program Quality Tool and what it measures, gain an understanding of your role as a facilitator during the 4-H Club discovery meetings, and know how to access resources available to support the quality work. Now I would like to ask, are there any other goals or maybe topics that relate to the quality initiative that you would like to discuss on today's webinar? If there is, please type it in the chat box now. Okay, so I mean, if something comes up, just let me know, and we'll try to address it during the webinar. If I can address it, I will make sure to follow up with you later on. So here is our opening activity. In the chat box, I'm going to ask you to write a few objective notes for this picture. So if you were sitting in the back of a room and this is what you saw, what is one or two objective notes that you would write about this picture? I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about that and write a few notes. I hope a few of you participate. So some notes are coming in. There's organized and bright room, feel welcome and comfortable to attend, welcoming message, smiles, organization, teamwork, welcome signs, flags, students, tasks, youth-led, members are in charge and running the meeting, inviting. So yeah, thank you all for participating. So definitely the warm welcome, which is part of the program quality tool, making you feel welcome. The 4-H welcome, they're welcoming everybody. I definitely youth-led, I would see, because it's 3 young people that look like they're in charge and leading. I would say it even looks like that they have materials ready, so they could be actively engaged in the meeting. And then the sense of belonging, they have their 4-H shirts on with a 4-H clover. And so that is a strong sense of belonging when there's T-shirts that have the program name or the club name on it. So thank you all for participating. I know it can be difficult sometimes on webinars to participate, but I do appreciate that. So why are we here today? We're here because quality matters. Hopefully you feel quality is important. We're here to move our programs towards a higher quality. It's up to each of us as individuals within our program to be that change agent. And I know we've been hearing that a lot lately, but I'm going to use that word, the change agent, to increase the quality of our club process, our club program for better youth outcomes. Why do we need to measure quality? Well, it's this affirmation of the work that you're doing as staff and volunteers. And you also, we can't make our programs better if we don't have a starting point. You need that base to kind of know where you are so you can have room to grow, and you know, and you have a goal and a common goal to achieve. So hopefully by now you've all seen, most of you have probably seen this lovely picture. It's the pyramid of program quality. And this is not something that was just kind of like thought up and somebody drew and designed. This is a research-based, valid framework. So the Wycroft Center for Program Quality, back in, I think it was in the 80s, they started looking at positive youth outcomes, and they did a long time study based off the high school curriculum, which is an early childhood based curriculum, but they took that base framework and they did all kinds of studies throughout the 80s and 90s, and they developed this pyramid. And what they say is that this is what you need to have high quality youth programs and to support youth. So the bottom, as you can see, of the pyramid is the safe environment, which is talking about the emotional safety, the nourishment, the healthy environment. We have been doing this for decades. Think back to the latchkey programs where, you know, it's just keeping the kids safe, and they were playing checkers in the cafeteria after school or something like that. And then the next level is supportive environment. Youth need to feel like they're welcome, that they have means to learn how to reframe their conflict, and that they're encouraged and praised. The next level is interaction, where kids feel like they have a sense of belonging. They're offered opportunities to do leadership skills. They have good adult partnerships. And the highest level is engagement, where youth have opportunities to plan, have choices, and do reflection. So as you can see, it's a pyramid base. And what we have seen across the nation in general is that the higher up the pyramid is harder for youth programs to reach. The lower pyramids, they do well. The higher up is harder for them to reach. I'm not saying that about your club in particular or your programs in particular. That's just across the board what they've seen nationwide. I do want to point out that when we later talk about the tool, we'll talk about domains and scales. And the domains is those 4 big items on the left, which is safe environment, supportive environment, interaction, engagement. And the scales are the little pieces that make up the domains. So as you can see, it's planning, choice, and reflection for engagement. And this might look familiar because it reflects the Maslow hierarchy, which suggests that we all naturally seek to learn and grow, but that we have needs that get in the way. And this pyramid assesses what actually happens in the program as a point of service. So it really looks at what's going on between the youth and the young, and between the youth themselves. Does anybody have any questions on the pyramid? Okay, we're going to move on. Again, ask questions, and I'll try to remember to check the question box. So this drawing illustrates that ongoing process. Is kind of another way to look at the pyramid framework. So we have that program quality framework pyramid, and then this is the youth program quality intervention or improvement process. you'll hear me refer to it as the YPQI. It's a process where the PQA is the tool, the program quality assessment is the tool, this YPQI is the process. So in 4-H, Missouri 4-H, we use the YPQI model as a self-assessment. So we do the self-assessment where faculty are trained to do the club assessment, and then they meet with club leaders, and the club leaders include adults and youth, and they identify the strengths and weaknesses, and then from there they plan 1 to 2 areas where they can improve. And that's the planning part, which we call discovery meeting. From there, they implement their plans with resources and training and support from YPAs and field faculty. It's an ongoing process, so that's what the arrows are for. So there's always room to improve. There's always room to check back and see where you are and what you can do better. So this is the YPQI process: assess, plan, improve. You'll see this all throughout the webinar today. And then this was just another fun diagram to kind of illustrate Missouri, more specifically the YPQA process. So we begin with the 4-H club assessment up there on the right hand corner. And then part of the assessment is the scoring, which we'll talk briefly about here in a little bit, the scoring of your observations. And then you get to the really good meat where there's a lot of good discussion in the discovery meeting, where you talk about what's really happening in your program, the action planning. This is normally really a very kind of intense but informal way to really look at your club and see what's really happening. And then you go into the improvement process, and there's a picture of one of the toolkits right there, but we have lots of toolkits and lots of resources on the S Drive to help support this overall process. So now we're going to dig deeper into the assess part of the YPQI process. So the step 1 is the assessment part. So first off, what you'll do, this could seem very intimidating. It's normally intimidating on both sides of the party. You know, the club might be nervous if somebody's coming to observe them and watch them and grade them. The assessor might be nervous because they're afraid that they're going to miss some key pieces of dialogue that happens during the observation. But it's really it's not as intimidating, and you really need to let the club know that you're just coming to observe. You're going to write what you hear and see, and it's really just to help them to have better experiences in their club. And there's no high stakes here. Their club's not going to shut down because of this. It's truly just a tool to help them, a resource to help them. And so hopefully they won't be too intimidated by you sitting in the back and taking notes. And to help with that intimidation process, we ask you to talk with the club prior about the process. We ask you to pick a date with the club that best works for them to come observe their meeting. Obviously, that probably won't be the first meeting of the program year. I would say January, February, when they're kind of going March, when they've had a couple meetings, club meetings for the year, maybe that'd be a good time to do one. Let them know you're coming. You arrive about 20 minutes prior to the club meeting, so you can really see the youth and parents entering the program or the club space. And you'll stay for the whole club meeting. So if the club meeting's an hour, you'll observe for an hour. If it's an hour and a half, you'll observe for an hour and a half. Typically, you want to sit kind of out of the way, maybe in the back of the room. By the end, you'll have 4 to 8 pages of notes, and that's just an estimate. You know, some club meetings are really quick and short. You might only have 3 pages, but that's just kind of the average that we've seen is 4 to 8 pages of notes. And I don't know what just turned up on that. And then you'll ask some following questions. You ask some follow-up questions such as maybe, you know, where's the first aid box? But typically you just sit in the back like a fly on the wall, take notes, and you leave. After that kind of comes a little more cumbersome part. You got to read your notes, kind of sit and score with the tool. That could take a little while depending on how many you do and how used to this you are. I would say that it might take an hour and a half for your first one. And after that, they get a little quicker. So part of the scoring is understanding the scores, and I like to be like 1s, 3s, 5s, oh my, like I like that because people often they don't understand the scores, they don't understand what the 1s, 3s, 5s mean, or they do understand, they get really sad about the 1s. So a 1 means the practice was not observed, it was absent that day. What I like to say when I score something a 1 is did not observe. That's the note I put with that score, did not observe. It sounds less intrusive than saying did not do or does not happen or something like that, because it might happen, but you got to remember you were only there on one night, one club meeting. It could have been a bad club meeting. It could have been that their club officers, both their top club officers were not there. And so it just was ended up being a bad night. And so I just like to say did not observe, because that kind of leaves, it's a softer way of saying like it wasn't there that day. It doesn't mean you don't ever do it. It just was not observed at that point in time. A score of a 3 means that the practice was there for some, but not all. So maybe some youth were able to reflect, but not all youth were able to reflect. Or I only heard one open-ended question, and this was it. And you maybe state that question. I didn't hear multiple open-ended questions. And a 5 means the practice was there for all, or you saw or observed it or heard it multiple times. So we score on 1s, 3s, and 5s. There's no 2s or 4s. There's no 3.5s. It's 1, 3, or 5. And if you are kind of old school and you remember the stackers and itters, there was always the 1, 3, 5, 7. Because 7 was like the top, best. You couldn't improve anymore. And the research has shown that there's really no 7s. Like every program has room for growth. And so this framework did away with the 7s, and it's 1, 3s, and 5s. A few of the questions are on the tool are yes, no. So that's either the practice was there or not. As simple as that, it's just yes, no. It was there or not. And then there's also the score of an X. And this gets confusing sometimes, but an X is just means it wasn't applicable to the program. So let's say you're at a club meeting and everything went fine. There was no conflict. So one of the items is how the club handled conflict within youth. There was no conflict. You would score that an X because it wasn't applicable. Like there was nothing for you to even score. So you typically see the X's in reframing conflict and also in safety equipment. If the club meeting did not need safety glasses or special gloves because they're cutting glass or doing, welding or something like that, then obviously they don't need safety equipment, so that's not applicable to them. So you're not gonna ding them on a score of a 1. I have a question that says, where do we get the 4-H PQA tool? It's on the S drive, which I will give you the direct link to all the resources at the end of the webinar. Thank you for that question. And I know you've all seen this before, but this is just, I had to throw this in here. It's just some advice on how to take effective observational notes. We ask that, you really try to take your opinion out of it. So if a club leader or a volunteer starts, yelling at the kids during the club meeting, like raising their voice, we ask that you don't say, Mrs. Smith yelled at the top of her lungs, because you don't know if that's the top of her lungs. It sounded like it, but you don't know. She could yell louder. And so you can say something simple as Mrs. Smith raised her voice to get the kids' attention, but you want to really keep that subjectivity out of there. So this is just a reference for you to go back to if you ever go back to this webinar of just some good effective notes versus ineffective notes. And then I wanted to take just a few minutes to kind of show you the tool. So this is the cover page of the 4-H PQA tool, which we adopted from the University of Minnesota. And the University of Minnesota worked with the Whitehurst Center directly to create a 4-H tool. So we're sharing resources, and their 4-H PQA tool fits well with the 4-H with the Missouri model, so we are using it. And so again, I just want to touch base that this tool is reliable, meaning if they have gone out and tested it, that they've been able to have multiple people watch the same event and score it within 80% of the same. And so it's reliable, it's valid, it's research-based. We will average scores to get the overall scores. That's how you get the overall scores. It's based off observations, point of service, what you really see. And again, you score on a 1, 3, and 5. So this is the cover of the tool, just so if you ever open it in the S drive, this is what it looks like. And then this is a very big zoomed in, just a page of the tool, and it's zoomed in. There's actually more things on the tool. And I just wanted to let you know kind of what you're looking at when you would flip the page in the tool. So up there at the top, you'll see interaction. So that's the domain, and that's the third domain on the pyramid scale. And then belongings bolded there, and that's the scale. So domain's the interaction, belonging. And then this item is looking at youth have opportunities to develop a sense of belonging. So what I suggest is when you go out and take notes, you would read that. Youth have opportunities to develop a sense of belonging. And you would find a note, observation note that fits in that area, and you would write it in the supporting evidence. And from there, so the supporting evidence is the staff started the session by facilitating 2 icebreakers, all of my neighbors, and 2 truths and a lie. So you would take that note and you would start at the 5 level, where it says youth have structured opportunities to get to know each other. There are team building activities, introductions, personal updates, welcome of new group members, icebreakers, and a variety of group activities. And you would say, does that fit my notes? And then the 3 is youth have informal opportunities to get to know each other. The difference between the 3 and the 5 here is the 5 is they have structure opportunities, meaning the leader sets that opportunity up, where 3 is informal, meaning the youth just informally got to know each other. And so in this case, it would be a 5. And you see that little empty box there, you would put a 5 there. So that's just kind of the nit and gritty of scoring and how you would do it. So I always say, read the indicator, write your note, and then start at the 5 and see if your supporting evidence matches the 5. If it doesn't, go to the 3. If it doesn't, go to the 1. So that's some advice on how you would score. So that was the paper tool of scoring, and I just wanted to make you aware that there is an online scores reporter system that you can enter the scores into the scores reporter system. So I actually suggest that you use the system because it will automatically calculate the scores for you. It averages, it means, it spits out this really beautiful PDF with a nice bar chart to really give you a good visual of where your club stands. And so we have set up a scores reporter account by region. So that means that each region shares an account. So if you forget your region's password, please contact me to retrieve it. Because there is this nice little, when you log in, like forgot password button. And if you click that, first off, you probably won't get a password because it's not your email that's tied to the account, but you might technically mess up everybody else's password in your region. So just if you don't know the password and you need to get into the system to enter in a PQA assessment, a club assessment, or retrieve a beautiful PDF report of what you put into the system, just let me know if you need help getting the password. And I am pretty sure I meant to check this, and I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that we have all the passwords on the S drive in that folder. I mean, the last time I pulled it up, that's where I pulled it up, but it's been a while since I pulled it up. So I would like to open it up now. Does anybody on this webinar want to share their club assessment experiment if they've done one? If you're on this webinar and you've done a 4-H club assessment, do you want to just share for a brief statement or two about your experience with just the assessment part? Well, that's okay. We can all be shy today, but or maybe you haven't had the experience, but I know as I've only done a few 4-H club assessments, but I do a lot of the after-school assessments, and I think what's fun is just seeing the kids engage and interact with adults and also with the materials that they're doing. And I really love it when the little kids come up and like want to know like how old I am and if I'm like somebody's mom or grandma or something like that. So anyways, it's always just fun to kind of get back out there and interact with the kids and really see what's happening at the club level. Uh, Stephanie Milner said the ones I did last year went well. There was no issues. So Stephanie basically saying it was easy breezy, right? At least the assessment part was easy. Thank you for sharing, Stephanie. So our next step in the YPQI process is plan. So we're going to kind of dig deep now into the planning of part of the process. So this is step 2, and here we call it discovery meeting. And maybe if you ever heard of after school people saying planning with data, that's just what they call it. But in the 4-H world, we call it discovery meeting. And I actually really like this title a little better than the planning with data because that sounds so boring. But discovery meeting sounds really interesting, like you're discovering a lot about your program. So what is the discovery meeting? It's typically what we have seen in the past is the 4-H specialist or educator will facilitate an open dialogue. So they will pull together a group of club leaders, adults, and youth. It's not the whole club. So if you have 100 people in your club, you're not going to do that. I suggest that you keep it to 10 or less, so you have some really good dialogue. But now if you have a small club, then yes, maybe you could do all 15 members. But I do suggest that you keep it to about 10 people and make sure you have youth voice in there. And it's you as a specialist or an educator, you're going to facilitate this process. And there's all kinds of resources on the S Drive under the discovery meeting folder. So do not feel like you have to do it on your own. There's agendas, there's handouts, there's resources. You do not have to create anything on your own. But your role would be to share the results of the assessment that you did with the group. They're going to be like, oh, we got a 1. Why did we get a 1? We always do that. And so just kind of refer to your notes to support their discoveries. Sometimes this is the first time that they're really looking at their club from a different lens. And so it can be hard for them to see the results. But just give them some time to really look at the results and read the comments. And then from there, I suggest that you have them pick out something they want to celebrate. Is to celebrate, share, grow. So pick out something and have them each say what they would like to celebrate based on the PQA. And it might be that door greeters, like I want to celebrate that we do have door greeters, so we do have that warm welcome. And then they might want to share, like something that they would be willing to share with somebody outside their club, maybe a potential partner or funder. So, and that might be that that they do planning and reflection, and that they're very proud of that. And then a place where they want to grow. And a grow could be as simple as maybe their club meeting is supposed to be from 6 to 7, but they're always still there at 8 o'clock. So maybe an example is trying to be more sensitive to the time and move the meeting along quicker. So just have them all celebrate, state their celebrate, share, and grow. And then from there, they need to come to a conclusion and kind of pick some areas that they want to improve. Now, I like to normally suggest that they always have at least 2 SMART goals on their plan. And I also like to say that one of those goals should be kind of one that's a little easier to attain, because that way they get some immediate feedback and, just that good work. And so maybe, for example, they don't do any reflection in the club meetings, and that's something that they could easily implement in the next couple of months. And so maybe have one goal that's a little like lower hanging fruit that they could reach in a quicker time, and then maybe a goal that might take a longer to reach. That's just my suggestion, but you don't have to do that. But definitely try to come up with at least 2 goals And when I say SMART goals, you know that has action steps, there's specific roles, is measurable, is realistic, and there's a time frame. So the discovery meeting is, again, just it's a smaller group of the club. Typically, they get together maybe like an hour and a half before the club meeting. After the club meeting, they've gone together at restaurants before, church halls, somebody's house. So it doesn't have to be anything formal. It's very informal, and it's a true just dialogue and having the people look at the program from kind of a different point of view. Because what you'll hear is often that somebody will be like, well, we always let our youth plan the meetings. But then they'll start talking, well, and they might realize, well, we don't always do it. Normally, Mrs. Smith does it, or something like that. So you just, it's just a good conversation starter about what really happens in the program. And again, I just want to stress who should do the planning. The youth and the adults need to do the planning. You as a specialist and educator are coaching. And YPAs are part of the discovery meeting process in terms of they're not facilitating it, but they're welcome to be at the discovery meeting to help, do that dialogue and help maybe have little small side conversations with staff and youth about what really is taking place in the program. And I like this quote, is the quality coaching method is based on the mirror metaphor. The guiding idea is for the quality coach to be like a mirror, reflecting back to the club leaders, youth, and adults to help them make their club even better. So yes, you're just a mirror and you're helping facilitate this discussion. Has anybody on this webinar ever facilitated a discovery meeting? And if so, would they like to just share their experience? Okay, again, I think many of you might be newer to this process, but the discovery meeting is not an intimidating process. It's very informal, and what I hear is that people normally say, we never thought about our club in this way before, and they normally leave energized and ready to make some improvements to their club. So the next part is the improve, is where you carry out your plan. And this is where the training, the coaching, and the resources come into play, because you want the program to reach their goals. So step 3 is the improvement part, and this is some pictures of some resources that we have available to help the clubs meet their goals. So in the top right-hand corner is the Quality Matters cards, which I will talk about in a little bit more in detail. In the bottom is the pyramid. We have a few big posters. I know there are some big posters floating out there in the regions, but I also have created this image on just like a regular 8x11 sheet of paper that you could hang up. So if you would like that pyramid hanged up in your club meeting space or in your office, just to kind of always be there as a visual to help you guide in your club programming, I can help you find that on the S drive. And then of course the S drive with a little mouse there. There are all kinds of resources there. And then we have the Quality Matters toolkit. So there's a toolkit for basically every part of the domains of the pyramid. So when they write their goals, maybe one of their goals is on being more welcoming. And so there is an actual toolkit on welcoming, engaging, and encouraging youth. And that toolkit gives you, it's basically a training kit that you could take to that club, and you could put on a little training on that supportive environment for the club. And that has the outline, that has the agenda, it tells you the resources you'll need, the materials you need. And a lot of these toolkits, there's not a lot of materials, it's just paper, pens, and Post-its. And then they have some activities in there that you can literally take back to your club meeting and so it's that night and implement right away. So these are very high quality toolkits that are very easy to digest it's all there for you, so you don't have to do a lot of planning. You don't have to make up a training from scratch. You do need a little prep work to get familiar with it, but nothing from scratch. But what's great about it is it really gets the members and the adults talking, and they can leave with ideas that they could implement that night if their club meeting that was that night. And another resource is your peers. You have a lot of peers that have been doing some kind of quality work, either on the club side or on the after school side for 5, 6 years now. With this framework, they've been doing it with other frameworks, but with this framework. And so reach out to your peers if you need help or support, and see what they've been doing and what's working well for them. And you can always reach out to me. I will help you in any way possible to work you through this process. The biggest thing with this step, though, is after the discovery meeting, do not forget that the club went through this process. I think this is where it's easy to kind of forget as the coach and facilitator. So this is where the YPAs and the faculty members need to maybe put a ticker on their calendar to check back in like monthly with the club and say, just a phone call, an email, like how's it going? How's it going with your goals? You know, what can we do to support you? So this is where I really see YPAs helping is checking back in and you know, seeing how they're feeling about the process and what other resources they need, because this is an ongoing process and never stops. And so just make sure you're doing that follow up and don't forget that after discovery meetings, because the process doesn't end there. There's always, you know, they're actually implementing their plans. And I like this quote. It's kind of, it's from Melissa Shear, but it's probably about 3 years old. But I wanted someone's view. Probably 3 years ago, we were doing a webinar, and we got her view on the discovery meeting. And she quoted, during the discovery meeting, it was energizing for me to see that the youth, parents, and volunteers were so interested and involved in the process. They all energetically listed the great things about their clubs, as well as were serious and thinking about how to make it better. They were interested in my observations that I reported from the process and chose some areas that they want to improve. I have been very busy lately, but I was so glad I spent the time on this process. It really helped remind me what it's all about, and I saw how great the club really is. And isn't that still true to this day? Like, we're all still very busy right now, but it's just making the time and the intentional time to spend, you know, a few hours with a club to help them improve their process. And it made her, I think it made her connect with the club more. It made her connect to what she's doing is good. You know, sometimes we get so focused on the day-to-day job that we forget about why we got into this work, and you know, we forget that we are still doing great things for youth. I had a question that comes in. Remind me, is there a minimum number of kids that must be present at a club meeting to do an observation? I know the Weicker Center says 5. They do suggest 5 uh, 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 kids in a club meeting. So if that's an issue, if you have like a club that's just starting up, maybe we won't do it this process for a couple years, but it's 5. So with that, I just kind of want to go back over. We talked about the 4-H club assessment, which is the first step in the scoring, and then we moved into the discovery meeting, where that's where the juicy stuff happens. You know, where you talk about the results of the assessment, you dive deep into what's really happening in your program, and you do some action planning, and then you move on to the quality improvement process. And again, please make sure you check back in regularly with the clubs and to see how they're doing and see what resources they need. So with that, that was the YPQI process. I have a few odds and ends, and so you might be thinking, how is the Quality Matters in 4-H different than after school PQA? Because I have mentioned the after school side a few times. And I'm glad you're thinking that, or I'm glad you're asking that, or maybe you're not, but I'm going to share anyway. So just a chart of the comparison of the after-school PQA and the Quality Matters process. So the difference mainly with the after-school PQA is that it's an external assessment. So it's it's 4-H faculty or HDFS faculty that are going into a program that they don't really know well. I mean, they might know them, but they're not in there daily, working with the kids daily or the staff daily. So it's an external assessment. They went through like a 2 to 3 day live training, and they had a test for reliability. So they actually had to test out. So it's kind of an intense process, but so they went through this rigorous training to be a credential external assessor. They use the same scoring system, that scores reporter that we talked about briefly a few slides back, to enter in their data, and then a beautiful report is created from that data entered. But from there, their role ends, and then the planning, the improving goes into the hands of the Missouri After School Network. And then the Missouri After School Network has coaches that have been trained to lead their planning with data discovery meeting and do other trainings. So that's their process, and it's a contract that Missouri 4-H has with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to do assessments on about 190 after-school programs across the state of Missouri. So that's the after-school side. The Quality Matters side is an internal, it's a self-assessment. So the 4-H specialist and educator are assessing their clubs in their region, their own clubs. And then I forgot to mention earlier that we do have some trained collegiate 4-H members that have gone through the training for doing assessments. So if you personally feel like you guys do not have the time to do a club assessment, reach out to me, and I could work with Teresa Bishop here in the office and see if, I think there's like 5 of them that have been trained, and they might be able to come out. They'll come out in pairs. They'll come out together and they'll observe together and score together. There is a small fee. I do not know the fee off the top of my head, but it mainly just covers their mileage, I think, so depending on where they're going. And but they're willing to do it. They're eager to do it. So if you do not have the time to do a 4-H club assessment, that is an option out there. But again, the process is they do the scoring and the scores reporter, and then the YPAs and will help with the discovery meeting and do the follow-up. Again, the faculty runs the discovery meeting, but the YPAs could definitely support that process and help with the follow-up. So now you're like, okay, this is a lot of information. Wow, what do I do with it? So the expectation right now for the Quality Matters in 4-H is that 4-H youth specialists and educators who have been in their role for 3 or more years are required to do this entire Quality Matters process, the assess, plan, improve, with 1 club per year. So if you are new to your role and you're in year 1 or year 2, we do not expect you or require you to do the Quality Matters process. But by year 3 and 4, you should start doing this process. We just don't want to overwhelm you. We know this is a really big job you've taken on, and so this is just something that you could do later on once you kind of get the groove going. Now, if you're eager and you really want to do one in year 2 or at the end of year 2, you're more than welcome to, but it's not going to be a requirement of you until year 3 to do 1 club a year. And you could pick the club, but you could do 1 club a year. And YPAs, again, will support the faculty and the club during the discovery meeting and implementation. Terry asked, how often should these assessments be done? It's 1 year, it's 1 club a year that it's the expectation if the youth specialist has been in their position at least 3 years. So you only have to do 1 assessment a year. So you do the assessment, you do the planning, and then you do the improvement. If you really want to see if the improvement worked, you could do a second assessment, and then kind of compare the second assessment to the first assessment. But we don't throw that in the requirement because that's just a lot of extra time. I know these clubs normally only meet once a month, and if you don't even start this process till January, that kind of doesn't give you a lot of time for that program year. So it's just one assessment a year if you've been on the job for at least 3 years. Oh, and how often should the club go through the assessment? It's really up to the 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 4-H specialists, educators, and the YPAs. Hopefully, you're having open communication. Um, a club might want to go through it every year, and if that's the case, then the club needs to work with their 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 county office. And if the youth specialist cannot make it out there, then we do have the collegiate 4-H members who could go out and do it. So there's really no expectations on like every club has to do it. I mean, it's really something that you and your youth specialist need to maybe work together and maybe hand split the club, or maybe a club wants to go through the process. So we'll leave that up to you to determine what club you do. So the next step, so really the next steps is if you are 4-H youth specialist or educator who's on year 5 of the job, you need to be doing this process, and if you need to be getting it started here soon. So if you're year 3 of the job, let's get this process started. So really the next steps is to start the Quality Matters in 4-H process with the club. So plan the observation date, pick your club, work with the club, plan the club, score, facilitate a discovery meeting, provide resources and training as needed, and then to check back in. If you're in year 1 and 2, I suggest that as time allows to just kind of go into the S-Drive folder and become familiar with the resources and the framework. Everything you need is there. So just, when you have some time or you can't sleep at night, just go on that S-Drive and that might help put you to sleep. But, just go on there and familiarize yourself with the resources and tools in this framework. Always ask questions, and that way you'll be better prepared in year 3 when you're ready to start doing this process. The question is, do spin clubs or special clubs have to go through this process? I don't know if they have to go through it, but they can go through it. And actually, I would be interested to see them go through the process because, um, the original PQA was designed to just look at one like very focused activity. And so I this the 4-H club tool was built upon the original youth development PQA. So I think it would actually be really neat to see a spin club go through this or go through this process, but it's not a required that you have to have one spin club and one regular club. It's really up to you and your youth specialist to determine that. But I could double check with Dawn and Allison, but I'm pretty sure like we're not requiring spin clubs to go through it. It's an option. So again, there's all kinds of resources. We have, there's the S-Drive, like link, MU Campus, 4-H, program development and evaluation. So the S-Drive was revamped a year or so ago, and I think it's actually easier to navigate, but all the quality matter stuff got put under program development and evaluation and assessment. So if you haven't been able to find it, that's where it is. So and it's Quality Matters in 4-H. And within there, there's subfolders, and they're broken down into the assessment, the plan, and the improve. So you could just open the assessment folder, and that gives you a checklist for prepping. It gives you the tool. It gives you the tool in a cheat sheet, like a smaller sheet, like front and back sheet versus the big like 8-page document. It just gives you all kinds of resources. And then there's a folder for planning, which gives you the outline for how to lead a discovery meeting, gives you tips, gives you handouts, gives you little think sheets that they can fill out. So everything you need is in there. If you can't find it, let me know. I'm more than willing to help you. But everything you need is in there. I did want to point out one fabulous resource that we do have that is not in the S-Drive is the Quality Matters in 4-H cards. So I love this resource. Out of all the resources we have, this is my favorite one. And so that's why I'm going to take a few minutes to talk you through it, because it's a very valuable tool that's not on the S-Drive. It's here in the 4-H office. So if you would like cards, if you don't have them, let me know and I could get some out to you. Um, but it's a very tangible way to get the use the quality tool in a pocket size in your hands, because literally you could put them on a key ring. It actually comes with a key ring, and you could just clip it onto your belt and wear it as a fashion accessory if you want. But it's just it's an easy way to digest this big framework. And you can see that the cards reflect each domain. So there's safety, safe environment, engagement, interaction, supportive environment. Um, so they have basically on each card is color coded. So engagement is green, and green, there's two green cards, and one is the domain, and it lists all the scales under the domain with one or two sentences that just sum up that domain and that scale. And then the other card is like practically speaking. It's like, okay, so what does this look like in the club? And it has like 4 or 5 questions that you could just ask your members, like, what is, you could ask, like, does the program provide time for members to have fun with each other? As simple as that. And it gets the conversation started. And it just really simplifies the tool, which can be very overwhelming. The yellow card, let's get the conversation started, kind of gives you some background and just instructions on how to use the cards. And I love this quote: young people can thrive when they feel safe, supported, and to learn and lead. So these cards are accessible to all of you if you would like some. And this is just a card sort activity. Like, there's so many activities you can do with the cards, but one of those simple activities I like is you have them group them by color. And then, so here, this is the quality standards. So as you can see, in engagement, it has planning, choice, reflection, and responsibility. Those are the 4 scales that make up the engagement domain. And then there's a brief statement that kind of explains what planning is, what choice is, what reflection and responsibility is. So you have them group the cards together, and then have them read it, and then they need to, like, from the left to the right, say what's absent in the program, what's happening all the time in our program. And so they can kind of make this continuum in front of them, and it's just another way to kind of get their head thinking about the the quality framework. And it's a good opening activity to maybe introduce the club to the process that they're about ready to go through before you do the assessment. It's also a good uh, an activity to do at the beginning of a discovery meeting. So there's just fun things to do. I really like these cards. So just let me know if you need them. Hopefully you've seen them before. Um, and then with that, does anybody have any questions over the terms? I threw out a lot of terms and acronyms, the process, and the expectations. If you don't have any questions now, and at 9 o'clock tonight you have a question, shoot me an email and I will happily reply to you. Maybe not at 9 o'clock tonight, but definitely I will reply to you. And I mean, this is an ongoing process, so things will come up, and just know that we are here to support you in this role and in this process. And with that, I do have a reflection. I need to model the program quality, framework. So I want to do a little reflection. And so I would like you to reflect and respond to one of these questions. Typically, you would have them do all questions, but for time and since we're on a webinar, just pick one question and respond. So the head, what was one new thought you had during today's session, or one new thing you learned? Heart, what was the emotion you experienced today and why? And hands, what is one thing you're going to do to help someone else learn why quality matters in 4-H? Or what is one thing you will take away and act on in the coming week? So if you all could take a moment and think and reflect, and then maybe share your response to one of these questions. And please don't be shy. Well, hopefully you all reflected internally, since I don't see anything in the chat box, but I don't know if I'm also looking at it right. So, oh, well, things are starting to pop up. Whoa, hold on. um, let's see. Willa says to remember the sense of belonging and its importance. It's simple but important to remember in planning. I agree, Willa. Uh, the kids are not going to come if they don't have a sense of belonging, if they don't feel like they are part of the group. Lena says, a way to use the cards. This could be a feel-good process. Make sure we accomplish this before each life close. Yes, and this is a good process, Lena, to to incorporate in 4-H life clubs. And again, the cards. I mean, there's other tricks you could do, but it's just a good way to get people's mind just introduced to the framework. Christy says it was an aha moment for me, understanding the after school and the PQA interaction. Yes, there's a difference in the two, and also learning that it's truly the point of service that we're getting at, the interactions with the youth and the adults. And Barbara says, I think this is a great tool because sometimes the leaders get stuck and need some new refreshing ideas for the club. I agree. Again, we all get stuck in our day to day, and this is how it's been, this is how it's always been, and you forget that just because it's working doesn't mean it's high quality, and it also doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. I thank you all for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it. And with that, I just want to close out this webinar and thank you for your time. I know everyone's super busy right now, so I do appreciate you taking the hour today to be on this webinar. If you have lingering questions or aha moments later or clarifications you need, that's my name, my contact information, and so always reach out and let me know if you have questions. With that, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.